Good afternoon. My name is Bahman Yazdanfar, and this is Turnaround, a weekly show brought to you by my colleague John Hardy and I to discuss the elements of the human behavior when it comes to interaction with each other, especially when stakes are high in the organizations and companies. In the last few weeks, we discussed the issues of the habit, the issues of how this habit generates, the issues of we are creatures of our own habit and use them as an addiction in form of addiction. And even last week, John discussed one method among many that is available for those who want using Tai Chi to understand other people as well as to overcome some of the conflicts gracefully. This week we are going to expand a little bit further again. We are trying to go deeper and deeper to our own psyches to understand what we are, why we do what we do, and if we can do something to get rid of those parts that we are not happy with it. And for that matter, I was discussing with John earlier that about a couple of two aspects of the specific behavior of us as a human being, and being masochistic and sadist.
Right, we've got those two aspects. That's right.
Two aspects. And how do you define these two play a role in our psyche? First of all, do we all have that part in us, or is it something that we inherit from our environment?
Actually, it's a tough one. I mean, I think that people who have, let's just say, either of these, right? Whether they have, let's say, fantasies that are masochistic or fantasies that are sadistic, on their own, they would experience it. They would be ashamed of it. It would be something that you wouldn't be very proud of.
Why don't you first define these two? So it's not just specifically being
sadistic. I would define as, enjoying others, gaining joy or arousal from the suffering of others.
Okay.
And then masochistic
misfortune.
Yes, and masochism is the opposite. Is really enjoying
being abused.
Yeah. Now the
it's
thing
like
is,
that song. Some people want to use you. Some people want to abuse you.
Yeah, no, which is that. So I mean, in a way, it's like the final extreme of, let's just say, aspects of human nature that we see every day. Like, for instance, basically a glutton for punishment. We save somebody. When you look at so many people and they look at their lives and it just looks like it's the same thing happening to them, and they're in this loop and they just can't get out of this loop. So I would say the majority of the human condition you'd actually have to put into the masochistic side. In that,
you're just tolerating what it comes to them for survival?
Well, it's almost like finding new and creative ways of creating the same pain. Right?
And why do we do that?
I mean,
in your opinion, I am not expecting you to be talking.
Why? I mean, I think part of it is we're used to it. I think that it's something that we've done for so long that to do otherwise would take great effort because it's change. And change means dealing with the unknown. And so in some ways, the greater pain or the greater perceived pain is the unknown. So an example,
so
let's say somebody
whatever we have is better than what we won't have.
Or what we might have,
yeah,
right?
Or
it's not even specific to what we might have. It's
we
the
are
idea.
Echoing.
Yeah, there's an echo.
Yeah.
It's the dread of the unknown. And I was thinking, the philosopher Kierkegaard talks about the distinction between dread and fear. And the fear is of something defined.
Who talks about that?
Kierkegaard,
okay.
Danish philosopher, 19th century. And he talks about this distinction between fear and dread. And that dread is of the unknown, fear is of the known. And that the fear of the unknown is far stronger, far greater. It actually is a kind of terror. And I think that we innately have this terror, this fear of the unknown. And so we distance it. We actually try to get away from it. So let's say the masochist, in a sense, is sort of accepts the suffering that they have because they're afraid of the unknown. This is what they know. As bad as it is, it's the known. Whereas in the case of the sadist, I think what they try to do is they try to control the environment they're into control. And so in controlling the environment, they are dealing with their fear of chaos, of the unknown, by gaining control. And I think they get a high off of this control. So they take
advantage of the other parties, of the fear of unknown?
I think what it is too, it's they're projecting their fear outward. So when the people who I know who are or sadistic, right? So invariably they're into control. So you think about, let's just say, in this whole sexual play, sadomasochism, you always think about control, an extreme level of control. Well, I was thinking, let's say, with respect to what I noticed in life, all the people who I know who are obsessed with control, underneath the ones who I know very well, and I've known them intimately or know what their background is, right at the root of this is there an intense fear, which is like a terror, and the terror relates to the unknown. And I think this is something that they started out with, and so that they wanted to escape this terror, and they escaped it by controlling their environment, and so they never want to go and look at that.
So what you're suggesting is both of them have the fear of unknown in these two categories. One is fold under unknown, another one tries to escape from it.
Both are trying to escape from it, but in different ways. The sadist is escaping from it is by controlling the environment.
Another one to submit.
Accepts the control.
Accepts the control, yeah.
Because all of a sudden, freedom for either. Because it was interesting. Once in fact, the other day, I was talking to somebody who was actually a professional dom, and they were talking about the fact that I asked them, well, did they have slaves? And they said, well, yes, I had slaves for a while, but I didn't like it. And I said, well, what was the issue? And he said, well, because they were so needy. They wanted this and they wanted that, right? Which is interesting when you think about it.
Masochistic also can be painful to the sadist.
Well, but also in the end, they became controlling of the sadist in an interesting way.
It's like your orientation. So you can say player is sadist.
On the sadistic side,
trooper is masochistic,
basically.
and then you go further, and you want someone that really so bad to get control of the player.
I wouldn't necessarily look at it.
Or let me rephrase that. If we just use the players and the troopers in your orientation, then the players become sadists.
Yes. For sure, they play that role. They're the controllers.
And troopers are the masochistic, and that is why always they need each other. It is why they stay in that position.
Ultimately, it's like a complementary pathology. Exactly, that one needs the authority, the one seeks it. And because they want the structure, right? And because even if let's say an example, people who are in relationships that are awful, or they serially are getting into with these bad relationships. And it looks like, well, why are they such gluttons for punishment? And I think part of it is that if they were to not do that, like if they were to completely now be cognizant of their behavior, then it places you in a position of responsibility, right? Where, I'm responsible. And I think naturally, in an interesting way, we think we want freedom. It's the thing we run away from the most, because with freedom comes responsibility.
And we don't want that responsibility.
We absolutely don't want.
It's like, say, people who don't want to commit themselves, including myself.
Look at success.
Like a fear of success.
Fear of success, I think, is, people think it's unusual. I think it's absolutely natural, and it's in just pretty well everybody. Worse, say, in the troopers than the players, for sure. And maybe in the players, it's really not so much, because they like to be successful. But certainly in the troopers, there's a fear of success. And part of it is that it's like now all of a sudden it's like the rules that they've lived by no longer apply, the constraints no longer apply. So now what?
They have to get out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, and also too, it's almost like, what do you do? Because it's like we spend so much of our time. Let's just say you have a particular problem, like somebody has let's say a fellow has a wife who nags him. Let's just say, and she's nagging. all the time, and he's used to being nagged and nagged and nagged, and he's always thinking to himself, he's waiting to be nagged, he's hating being nagged, he's resenting her, he's hating her, he's thinking, oh my God, it would be great if I didn't have this. He's giving all these thoughts, right? Now, basically his brain's looping around the same thoughts all the time, and most of the time, if you were to actually examine his brain, one of those thoughts in that loop is basically in his brain at that time. So his brain's occupied. Now imagine he goes through some course, and let's say with Tai Chi, for instance. He comes to gain a degree of awareness. He sees that this is a loop. It's unnecessary.
The wife or the guy?
The guy.
Okay.
Right? And he then can see that this is a choice. Either he's going to stay in it or not. So then he decides, okay, I'm not going to stay in it. Okay, I'll leave. So now all of a sudden, he's left. But all of a sudden, he's got all this excess capacity, right? All that emotion and that energy invested in that tension, now, what does he do with it? Right?
Free. He has
Free.
too much time to...
Exactly. And what it is an intense boredom comes in. And I think that one of the greatest pains of the human condition for just about all of us is boredom. We'll do anything to avoid boredom.
Avoid ourselves first, and then boredom.
Because why do we gossip? Why do we do all these negative things?
Because it distracts us from ourselves,
and it kills the time.
So if this is the case, let's drop a little bit of the challenge. Let's say a person who is naturally predisposed. I mean, his or her predisposition is in the category of being masochistic.
Yeah.
And you said some of us or most of us probably even don't know we are that. We are just doing it.
We wouldn't label, yeah, exactly. We wouldn't like to label ourselves as that.
Fine.
Exactly.
Then why, if when they get into the discussion and debate with their family members or colleagues or even strangers, and someone bring that up to them, they get so defensive? For instance, for instance, in the case of the let's say the relationship that you earlier alluded, there is one party is being abused, but because he or she, or mostly she, in this based on what we hear, she does not. She's unaware of unknown or aware of unknown. So she stick with it because she doesn't know what will happen in the future if she leaves that position. But if the same person talking to her sister, let's say, or to her mother or to her friend, and the friend say, "Oh, are you stupid? Are you crazy? You put yourself in that position." She start to fight with them and deny that. So
right, because they hold on to it.
So she knows there is some truth to that where she stands, but based on what you said earlier, it seems to be that many people, or large number of the people, they are just doing it without knowing it. Now, where we define the line between knowing what we are and what we are predisposed.
I think also too, we know when we want to know, right? I think that unconsciously we know, but consciously we resist knowing, right? So what happens then is that I think that when a certain point is reached, when the pain is bad enough, we will allow ourselves to know. We'll allow ourselves to see that which is right in front of our noses, right? But generally we'll only do that when the pain is large enough. The pain is great enough that we just can't take this anymore.
So larger threshold of your pain is longer it takes to come to the realization.
Well, yeah, and look at the vast majority of us. If you look at anybody's lives, and if somebody else looks at ours, they can probably see this, is that most of us basically spend our lives doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? Yeah. It's just a loop, right?
Yeah.
Certain kinds of behavior, but nobody perceived themselves to be doing this. They all perceive themselves to be at least trying to change it. Maybe we perceive that it's the same thing, but there is in terms of the result, but we think that we're actually, constantly acting to change it, but life is somehow getting in the way. Life is against us, right? That's how we experience it. I mean, you know.
And that is because of our own habits and the way we are doing things over and over again.
Well, and I think it also is that if we don't experience it that way, right? Like, so let's just say our life is the same. Whatever is happening. I've got the same habit, whatever I'm doing. You know, you know, avoiding taking the garbage out or whatever it is. So you avoid taking the garbage out. In the meantime, you know, let's say my wife would be irritated with me, and then that'll set off an argument, and then, you know, on it goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you'd think, well, wouldn't it be just smarter to simply do it, right? No.
Avoid it.
Right. But what ends up happening when you take a look at that behavior is, whatever reason, there's a resistance to actually taking that simple action, because that's why it remains. That action now has become symbolic in a way. And so in an interesting, bizarre way, it's just not experienced the way somebody from the out would see it. It's just as a simple act. No, it's symbolic. It's now I'm doing it out of principle. But in the end, what it is, it's a way we can always delude ourselves to make sure that we can stay exactly where we are. So I think that most of our behavior really is kind of like a box. And the whole box, it's all part of this huge kind of, like, you know, Pink Floyd's The Wall around us. This prison that we make for ourselves, so that we can stay exactly where we are. Yeah, and I think that's part of the human condition, and for those of us who break out of that, we have the ability to actually pull it into consciousness and go against it, even though we still experience it. It's almost like, you know, this expression, you know, fear it, but do it anyways. Mm-hmm. So you experience it, but even in experiencing, you recognize, aha, this is just a false feeling. This is just a false flag that is being sent by my psyche. Now I'm going to actually go through it.
Where is that shift? How that shift can come from? Because even if you look at the companies, collective, I mean, organizations, and let's say just treat one organization as a entity of one man. Man,
right.
I mean, man
Think of it
woman.
as a persona,
Yeah.
which is fair. Yeah.
And but it includes 100, but
Right.
they are doing same collectively going towards same direction or same
Yeah.
goal. And this box is there. Either individually, if a person wants to change his or her own behavior at one point or another for any reason, that either he or she reached to the threshold of the pain or realization or other reasons, or a company get to the point that it's not really productive. There is a leap has to take place in order to get out of that box. How let's say in this scenario, assume that we reach to that point that we know that we need that leap, but how to make that leap? What do you think? Because
I think it's a kind of shift of consciousness. You're in one state, and then even allowing yourself to entertain the possibility that you're wrong, right? That there could be something else.
Yes.
That's already an intermediate state. The state of just allowing the possibility. And then once you allow the possibility, then you're actually listening to what's going on, right? So what's happening, I think, is, if you look at, let's say, how we spend our lives, our internal noise is so great that it's crowding out anything coming from the outside world.
Okay.
So all we have to do is basically reduce the volume of that noise.
I think do we have a guest? Oh, we have a guest. A guest is she?
No, this is not Cindy.
Oh, it's not. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it's your guest arrived. Sorry. Go ahead.
So when we
it was a good break for your
natural
thoughts.
segue.
Don't get it. Okay.
God knows what my
No.
thoughts are.
So you said we get to that break.
Yeah, we got
but
the
the
thing
point is how to make that leap.
But normally, the noise, the external noise, right, is so great that, sorry, no, it's the internal noise that's so great. We're actually just listening to our own thoughts. So an example in a conversation, right? And I was thinking about this in relationship. Look at our perception of time.
Okay.
If you were to actually ask people, let's say in a conversation, how much time they were speaking, how much time the other person was speaking, almost invariably, they will, it'll be very much skewed in favor of them speaking. Their perception of how much they spoke will be far less than how much they actually did, because their sense of time when they're speaking will be, almost non-existent, whereas when they're listening, or not even listening, just waiting to speak, not speaking, time is traveling very slowly for them, because they're really not engaged with the other person, they're engaged with themselves. Right?
Okay.
Now, so what happens then is...
I had another episode just last week.
So what happens then is that it's basically I'm speaking, then I'm waiting till I can speak again, then I'm speaking, etc. Now, when you take a look at, let's say, two people who are in love, a really connected relationship, even when they're speaking, listening, it's almost like they're listening and speaking at the same time. That when one is speaking, the other one is completely absorbed in the other one as they're speaking, and vice versa. And so what's happening is that the two of them are not experiencing time at all. They're like outside time. They're engaged. So I think we experience time when we are not engaged, when we're disengaged, right?
Okay.
So then what happens then is, when are we normally engaged is when we're focused on ourselves, generally in our lower state. And the moment we can't focus on ourselves, we're experiencing it as pain. It's like boredom.
Okay.
So we want to get back to that. Now, as long as we're doing that, nothing is coming in, no information's coming in. We're not even seeing what's happening in the environment around us. We are just lost in our thoughts. So when you take a look at, let's just say you go to the subway, you go on, on the streetcar, and you look at people, mostly, except for older people, I would say, it's less the case for them, but for younger people in particular, they look generally very preoccupied with what's inside, and they're oblivious to the outer environment.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That state then means nothing is really going to change. They're in a bubble. It's just self-referencing, just thinking. And let's say, you'll talk to them, and by and large, very often with a lot of people, as long as the subject is themselves, you can maintain this conversation. It's not really a conversation, but you can maintain this interaction. But the moment that you cease to convey that positive mirror, to hold the light on them, it's the end of the conversation.
Okay,
right? So it's not an exchange, it's not energy going back and forth.
But that was a little bit away from the question. The question
No
was...
doubt.
The question...
I have no doubt.
The question was,
exactly what we're talking
we
about.
get to that
See,
state...
that's what I was hoping to demonstrate.
Yes, that I am awake. And I'm listening. Of course I am listening.
Which is very daunting, because the thing is, if you're not awake, it's so much easier.
Yes, I could be self-involved with my own thoughts. But having said that, let's say that person in the bus wake up one day and say, okay, I'm going to change. I'm getting to the point that I have to make a change get out of this box that I created. I'm asking, what is the leap? What is the action he or she can take to leap that moment? A person who knows that
you know what it is?
Because that applies to the organizations as well.
No, I would say it's like this. My perception, let's say when I'm in a loop, I'll be, at a certain moment, I will perceive, this could be our guest. Well, it looks like there's still potential for our guest to arrive.
Okay.
Apparently she's parked.
Just our producer should let us know. Who was the other lady then? Oh, okay. Why I didn't recognize? Oh, I didn't have my glasses. Oh, God,
Like
sorry.
this is like two idiots who just basically.
We get to that subject.
Actually, that's right. Why don't we get to the morons and idiots topic,
First,
because
go
it's
to
so
the
much
lib.
more to the point.
Oh, yes, we get to the.
I mean, that's where we have a degree of expertise at least.
Yeah, of course we are. We are.
You can take the moron position. I'll take the idiot. At least that'll be our opening.
We can symbolize.
Yes. Well, not even symbolize. I think we can actually do a convincing imitation.
Okay.
We'll fool the crowd.
But what's happened to the lip? How do you? Let's say you.
Okay, so
let's say
yeah.
that person. Let me bring it in a smaller scale. That guy.
So that I can understand.
Yeah, that guy
right
getting
down.
the garbage out. He has some sort of the psyche or the that I'm not going to do that because that is more important not to do that for whatever reason, principle, lack of letting not letting someone else control him or whatever number of reasons. And then one day, as you said earlier, that it's realized that it's simpler to do it rather than listening to her. So he realized that now it is the time that he wants to leave behind all of his old principles and take the garbage out. What is the leap mentally? He has to come to he has either to discard all of his belief system,
actually,
or he has to have some sort of a revelation in his psyche that he was wrong.
Actually, I think when it is that normally when we're experiencing interaction, we experience it from our own perspective, right? Just from this viewpoint.
Okay.
So let's just say I'm in this conversation, I'm seeing you. This sort of creature that looks like Bauman,
Yeah.
who's talking at me.
It's really Bashman, but
Bashman or Bauman, I'm still, the jury's still out.
Okay.
So you're talking at me. Okay. So I'm experiencing this is happening to me, right?
Okay.
It's like information's coming at me, I'm experiencing life happening to me. If I somehow, and we can always do this at any moment, switch out of that perspective and now look at it from the side, and I look at this relationship, and let's just say maybe I happen to see a film, right?
Okay.
A film where there's a relationship,
Okay.
and I watch exactly this conversation in this film, right?
Like we see our own film a week from now.
No, exactly.
Okay.
For instance,
Yeah.
if we did bother to look,
Yeah.
I try to avoid it.
And that is a habit that you have to overcome.
Another habit that I have to actually break is when we then look back at that, we look at that metaphor for ourselves, and we think, oh, is that happening to us? Now all of a sudden our frame is no longer just this.
Okay.
It is now looking at this relationship from the outside, from the
like
camera.
a third party point of view.
Exactly, and that's it. And you know what? With that,
We have a guest.
It looks
your
like-
guest arrived.
our show
Okay.
is about to take a completely new twist.
Okay. Now we have to talk about. So we cannot talk about the idiots then.
Well, we could, but I think we're going to find much more interesting things to talk about. Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, and here, exactly.
Okay.
I'll move to the. To the
You
side
move a
in
little
our-
bit further.
Yes, exactly. So
I have to get to know.
hopefully, I'll take the
guest.
microphone with me.
Hello,
Exactly.
and how are you?
Yes. Well,
Bahman, have a seat.
hi, Cindy. Welcome to our show.
Thank you. Pleasure
So,
to be here.
Oh yes, it's our pleasure.
Oh, you made it a little bit late, but you made it. You made it.
Well,
Fashionably on
no,
Okay.
you came in just
Half
the right
an
time.
hour.
Oh, did
Exactly.
I? Awesome. I
we were
missed
just
the idiot comment.
well,
Oh, no,
well,
it
we were-
was nothing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, it was our discussion.
Okay.
Don't take
Sounds
it.
good.
No.
No, I'm just
a
joking.
little break
We
from them.
never
Exactly.
say
That's
idiot
right.
in front of our guests.
Oh, okay. Well, there
We
you go.
always
so I'll turn
talk
around.
always after the show we talk about that.
Oh, okay. I
No.
see.
Can you introduce yourself with full name and a little bit of your background so people know who you are as well as I know?
They probably
Why
know
they-
you already, probably much better than us, but let's just pretend that they don't know
Yeah.
you.
Sounds good. All right. I am Cynthia Stone. I am a Jacqueline of many trades. I am a certified social worker, addictions counselor, life skills coach. I'm a host of the disabilities channel Let's Chat. I'm also an actress, singer, voiceover, host, and model. I think I've got it all. Yeah.
My God.
And
Yeah.
when do you have time to do all of that?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm just always on the go, you know. We all
Okay.
wear many hats.
That's good. Now, I was not aware of the, I mean, because usually John invites most of the guests for this show.
Yes.
And usually I have some sort of the very faint idea what is that about. But apparently you guys have had some discussion about that. And I asked John to start a little questioning, and then I step in and just do my thing. But please be aware that don't alarm about my question. Is the way I talk.
Oh, no.
There is no malice intended.
No worries. I don't take offense to anything, so go ahead.
So of the hats, let's say, which hat do you have a hat that you prefer?
Let's see. The hat I prefer would probably be, I mean, I feel like I am, it's a very good question. I haven't been asked that. My paradigm, I guess, is from a social worker perspective. I really want to help humanity. So that's my raison d'etre, if you will. I really want to be the change I want to see in the world.
Oh, that is a good.
Yeah.
You see that question
now,
opened the whole
you
can of worms for me.
Thank
Where
you
are
for
those
that.
worms?
Because,
Yeah.
exactly,
Okay,
because altruism is one of Bauman's specialties.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
He's a huge
Which I
fan.
don't believe
Now we're
at all.
talking. Oh, good. The skeptic. I like it.
Oh, he's beyond
Yeah.
skeptic.
Actually,
That's putting it lightly.
I am going to.
You thought you were being safe. You ended up provoking our host.
I am going to adopt the middle name Skipped.
Oh, really? All right.
But let's say, first of all, you're academically become a social worker.
That's right. I have
Okay.
my master's degree in
Okay.
social work.
So
yeah.
where did you study, by the way?
I started off actually in York University.
Okay.
I was taking psychology there. I left that, and then I went into George Brown, where I
Okay.
did the community worker program,
Yeah.
the addictions counseling program. They had an articulation agreement with Hilbert College, so then I went over to Buffalo, and I got my Bachelor of Science in there. And
From
then
University of Taiwan?
actually Hilbert College,
Oh,
which is in
Hilbert.
Hamburg, so I was a
Okay.
hamburger.
Okay.
And then I moved on, and I got my master's degree in social work from the University of Buffalo.
Okay. Now, is there any particular practice in the, because social workers usually are by the time they finish their study, they go to one in a specialty, either
Yes.
the geriatric help or the drug abuse help or the battered woman help or whatever.
Yes.
Is there any? No, there is.
I don't know if it's called that specifically.
No. I
Yeah.
call it the way
Yeah.
it is.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to
You don't
just
put your punches.
sugarcoat it. Is there any particular class of the specialty you are interested, or you were interested at that time?
That's a very good question. Actually, I found that to narrow my focus, I found that was a huge problem for me because I felt that that was limiting. For me, I wanted to have the generalized skills to be able to help anyone and everyone. So to narrow down my focus and choose one specific population was definitely a challenge, but for your practicum, you do have to choose that. So although I had a generalized social work practice, I did narrow in my focus. So I was working with abused women. I was working with...
That was the
yeah, there you go.
phrase.
There's the politically correct way. I was working with sexual offenders,
Okay.
working with children
So
with
you
mental health issues.
work with you play both sides of the.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me, I mean, it was really, I was all about, rattling the status quo. So when they said that females were primarily the victims of crimes, I went out of my way to prove that theory wrong, that there are as many female perpetrators of crimes as there are males, and vice versa. It's just that something that wasn't being talked about. So I met male survivors of female sexual abuse, for example, a man who had been gang raped by a group of women.
I said that actually it's very interesting. About a couple
Yeah.
of weeks ago, not
This was
a
in
couple of
Buffalo?
months ago.
This is actually in
Yeah.
Canada. in
Yes, it
Ontario.
was in the
Yeah.
university,
Yeah.
around York University. I remember with
Yeah.
the van and all of that.
Yes,
I
yeah, the
remember
outreach
that.
van.
A couple of months ago, I had a discussion with someone, and I
Yes.
mentioned that, and If she told me there's no way, I said, well, it happened, and she again challenged me. Anyhow, I didn't go to details, but vividly I remember that the few women that drag a guy inside a van, and it is allegedly rape. I don't know if I was not there, but what was the you as a human being, as an individual, what was the you said you wanted to rattle the system, or rattle the idea of the system, or stigmatization of the system. Why that thing was important? What was your personal connection to get to that kind of to the stage of challenging system?
Another great question. I found that the rhetoric...
All of my questions are good.
Oh, well, I don't know. We'll be the judge.
Oh, well, no, you keep saying that. I said, I know.
Okay, well, fine. I'm going to stop saying it. I tell
Keeps
things as
raising
it
the bar
is.
higher
Yeah,
with each
exactly.
question.
Yeah, maybe
Just
I have
wait.
rock bottom expectations.
You see,
The ultimate question is going to be coming.
The ultimate question. I'm excited for that.
Sooner or
Stay
later,
tuned.
you'll get
these
the
are all
ultimate question.
just
On
These
the
are
surface.
primers.
Okay, all right. So this is primer leading up to that big one. Well, I'm
It might not
excited
even
for
be
that.
a question. It'll be sometimes only after the show that you know that you're hit with the ultimate question.
Bam! Right over the head. Okay, well, now I forgot my train of thought. No, just kidding.
No.
So for me, it was really about challenging, because I found there was a difference between the rhetoric and the reality.
Okay.
So they would have all these beautiful ideas, and by they, I mean when I walked into the social worker system, I found that the classrooms, for example, preached this empathy, preached, loving your neighbor as you love yourself. I mean, not coming out and saying those religious dogmas, but really taking that approach that you need to be this glorious chain of love of giving and receiving. And then I saw what was in practice was not necessarily the case. So I was in school, for example, in Buffalo, and they had somebody who was coming out as a woman, was a man. And there were a lot of snickers in the class. People weren't ready for that. And I just found like, okay, well, we can't even be respectful to this individual who has come to speak. Like, people were like, oh my gosh, I would never, why is this freak coming into our classroom? Like, things like that were being said. And I was just listening to this and going, there's a real disconnect between what we're learning and what's actually happening. So I really wanted to be that person that really put it out there just to see how they would react, and then kind of reflect back on that. Because for me, when I saw that happening, I thought that walking into this classroom, I would find like-minded individuals like myself. Granted, no one is exactly like you. I mean, we're all different, and no two people are exactly the same. But I thought going into a social work field, you would find fellow do-gooders, perhaps. People that actually want to make a difference in the world and make it a more beautiful place.
No, that's the last place you should look for them. Accountants.
Right? Yeah,
You'll
maybe.
find them with accountants. They're the ones who genuinely want to help. Merchant bankers and accountants have been proven to be the ones who genuinely...
Sounds so calculated.
It does, exactly. But underneath, they're really helping, and they suffer because they're not perceived as such.
And they don't communicate with others.
Yeah, see, they're number crunching, right?
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
Behind the scenes.
Well, they're the real heroes. They're the power behind those social workers. Totally.
So what you get out of that experience?
So what I got out of that is that things aren't always as they seem. That just because it has a beautiful mission statement on its walls, for example, you may find that the actual practitioners... Yeah, exactly. I mean, I find that there is a lot of acting that goes on, and I didn't expect to find actors in the social work field, and maybe that's why I found such a great bridge from the social work to the acting.
So you got two for price of one, then?
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. It was amazing to see the masks, and I recognized that I didn't learn as much as I would have liked to in terms of helping humanity in the field of social work. It was only when I went inside and I realized that the real change has to happen internally. In order for you to be able to help people, you have to first help yourself. And that was something that was missing from that school.
Would you say that the majority of people who are in these situations, on some level, they bring it upon themselves? And I don't mean like the undeserving poor, etc. But I'm just thinking that just from the people I know, whose lives somehow they keep sort of repeating the same thing, it seems like the same drama is just going on and on and on, but they're always experiencing themselves as the victim of it.
That's right.
Right?
I think you're absolutely right, John. The thing is that we do get the same kind of lessons. And until you learn that lesson, it's going to keep repeating, and you're never going to progress. And so a lot of the time, what I found with the social work pathology is that we tend to placate the victim. Like, it's okay. You're just the victim of circumstances. It's outside of your control. But really, we have to put the onus of responsibility on them. Like, not to say that you are to blame for your circumstances, but there is a choice that happens. You come into this world and you have choices. We are empowered to make those choices. We are the creators of our own world. And by the choices you're making, you're actually choosing this lifestyle. You are choosing to stay in an abusive relationship, for example. You know, as terrible as that might sound, and oh my gosh, I can't believe she said
Not
that.
in this show.
But at the end of the day, it's true. It is a choice.
No. I'm saying
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's not
And
terrible
so-
sound in this
Yeah.
show.
Oh no,
In
it's
fact-
actually
in
it's
fact,
more pleasant than most of the stuff that
in,
comes
fa-
from
in
this.
fact, you are
Yeah.
very refreshing for the
Yeah, well, there you
among,
go.
among all of the
For our
other
audience, this is
guests.
a
there you
huge
go.
step up.
As a matter of fact, we were just before your arrival. We were talking about the two elements of the two opposing elements of the individual or humans,
Yeah.
which is the sadistic and masochistic.
Yes.
And what you just described is the circumstances that generates or keeps that masochistic kind of the behavior.
Yes.
And I noticed, I am from Middle East originally, but I noticed not only in North America, but even in the Middle East, the victimization and the victim society always is like a squeaky grease, the kind of the thing.
Yeah.
They are getting something. So is it applicable in the social service as well? Isn't it the reason that people stay in that state of the or predisposed in the predisposition of the victim? They want to get something out of the system or something or human attention or anything like that.
Absolutely. I think that we do reward that behavior, that because people are homeless, for example, we give them the shelter, we give them all the benefits, we give them everything they need to perpetuate that cycle. Really what we should be doing is showing them that you can actually improve your circumstances, get out of that. I don't think necessarily that they're consciously choosing to be masochistic, but I do feel that somewhere along the line, there has been this sense of a loss of control, like a sense that they are not capable of changing their circumstances, that there's almost what Pavlov referred to as learned helplessness. So, you know, with that study of the dogs, and they kept zapping them, and eventually they stopped trying to jump out of the cage.
Seligman.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. So just that idea that, you know, well, you know, no matter how hard I try, this is how life is. I think that really we need to be looking, rather than, you know, enabling and giving all these, you know, benefits, I think we really have to be looking at, well, are you content? You know, where do you see yourself? What do you want to do? How can we really help you to help yourself? You know, somewhere along the line, whether it's been modeled for them, whether they've just given up, where they've had a complete loss of self-esteem, or, you know, whatever happened along the line, something along the line broke them, shattered that little piece of hope, of possibility within them. And I think that that's really what's missing, is that we have to
Actually-
reignite
So,
that.
so the ones who get out,
Yeah.
let's say if we look at the ones who, you know, where it works, what would you say it is that distinguishes them from the other ones, that makes, that you could say generalize about the successes?
Yeah.
What would you say about, that would be like something that stands out about them?
I think that really what it comes down to is the sense that they've had enough, that somewhere along the line they snapped and they said, you know what, not anymore, never again. You know, whether it's because you know, they were being abused and then all of a sudden it went to their unborn child, they're pregnant, or whether it's that they grew up in poverty and they didn't want to have it anymore. Whatever it might be, there was some point along the line where they just said, enough is enough. I need to take control and reach that next milestone.
So it's rage. The initial term, because we were talking about exactly this very topic just before. So it's an intense rage that is the motive force at that moment that breaks it.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think that, yeah.
can I dissect
makes
it a
sense.
little bit further in regards to the homeless, because I
Yeah.
wrote about them as well.
Yeah.
And not because I feel politically the political establishment helping them. to stay that way.
Yes, exactly.
And because they make money out of it.
Yes.
For instance, in the city of Toronto, we have about 5,000 homeless people, estimated is this number of city, and they spend close to $200 million every year for the shelter. That is $40,000 per homeless. With half of that, they can give them apartment and
Thank you. Exactly. The cost of homelessness is,
so that is the political and the profiteering
Yeah.
part of that.
Yes.
But let's focus on the actual homeless person
Yeah.
that you just brought. You said that they get to the point that their threshold, say, or the bubbling water of that pot start to jump out,
Yes.
and they say, "I am going out and do that."
Yeah.
Is it a logical decision, or is it the emotional decision that makes them to do that? Because logically, I think is not possible.
so-
I think based on what I have seen. I'm just asking you if you have experience to just.
I think it's a combination. I don't think it's a one or the other. I think they both almost have to go in line. Like, I think your heart and your mind both have to join together. Like, it's one thing if your heart is taking a beating and you're just like, oh, you're constantly crying yourself to sleep every night. But if your mind isn't on board saying, you know what, I can get out of this, I need to break through, then you're not going to do anything. And similarly, if you're all cognitive and you're thinking, I'm going to do this, but your heart just isn't in it, then you can't do it. I think you have to have the united
That is
voice.
why I'm saying if they arrive to the point of being broken,
Yeah,
emotionally or intellectually,
yeah,
either one,
then
they won't be able, or they won't have the capability to just make that leap.
I think that sometimes with the breakdown comes the breakthrough. So I think
But you need both elements,
you
don't
need
you?
both elements.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is-
exactly. So
But you were saying something? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just listening to this, and I'm just thinking, I was thinking, because it's not a rational process, because rationally,
Yes, rational.
at every
use.
point in time, there would be just a reason to accept the norm that you're in, which is a kind of downward spiral.
yes,
There's a point at which that downward spiral creates a kind of compression. Something happens, like this unborn child. Some event happens, and I think it's a kind of a shock.
yes.
So at that shock, then what? But then, okay, so let's just say we go to that point of that shock. So what's happening at the point of a shock?
We want to discover that shock
Because
because
here we're at the shock. What's really happening at that point? And maybe it's an altered consciousness. You're actually shifted out of your world.
It could be. Yeah, I think actually
It
you
forces you out.
Yes. I think you've hit it on the nose, and that's exactly it. Like, all of a sudden you've been shaken out of your reality, and this is like that point where you're just like, oh my gosh, no.
The horror of it
Yeah,
all of a sudden is
exactly.
revealed to you.
It just, kind of like
is
bam.
it
hits you all
a
at once.
fear factor,
I think,
or is it just a point of the realization to manifest yourself to something else?
yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think actually you're living in fear, and then it's almost like you have two paths. You either have the path of fear or the path of love. And the path of fear doesn't exist, and that's what you're constantly miserable. You're living in that state where you're constantly like doubting yourself, and all of these unfounded fears are crippling you. You're debilitated. But then when the love comes along, that's when you're just like, you know what? I deserve better than this. I deserve something more than this. For the love of my unborn child, for the love of something, you just find that strength, that power, and you manifest it, and you break through.
So you believe in love, though?
Oh, I definitely believe in
okay.
love.
So-
Actually, the shirt I'm wearing right now is a Chinese symbol for love.
That makes one of
There you
us at
go.
least. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. And now we've come full circle. Here she
That's
is.
right, exactly. With that segue, exactly. That's right. We'll get into your commercial exactly for Chinese shirts. The whole purpose why you're in exactly.
Are you promoting the Chinese culture or Chinese language?
No,
or
actually, I
Chinese philosophy. because what you described from the session you went to the social services was
Yeah.
like I was immediately the name came to my mind was Confucius.
Confucius.
Oh, because it help you,
Exactly.
they help your neighbor, help your
Yes.
love your
I
neighbor.
don't know if that was Confucius, but
No,
Yeah.
Confucius is.
Oh, yeah?
love thy neighbor
No,
as
no,
thyself.
no. Respect your neighbor, respect your friends, respect your authority. All about respect.
Well, okay.
Not love much, but mostly about respect.
Oh, okay. Well, which is a form of love, absolutely.
In those days, it was, believe me.
Exactly. I knew you'd pull Confucius into
Yeah, there
this.
you go.
Yes, it is a
Exactly.
circular reasoning.
There you go, exactly.
Exactly.
But,
Good old Confucius.
But are you working as a social service here in Toronto?
I am, yes.
Where do you work, if you don't mind?
I'm at various locations. So
I mean which project? I'm not.
I work with the homeless on the front line.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm working in the shelter system. I go to various locations. So I work with the hardcore addicted, street people, whether they are street workers, maybe they're also selling their bodies. So definitely.
You're
I
talking
have a
about
wide
prostitutes,
range.
huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you work in a base based on the under the jurisdiction of the city hall, or do you work based on with a private entity?
So we are a social service agency that has the government umbrella. So we have to meet
they
those,
get a mandate and the grant and all of that.
Exactly.
Now, can you walk us through a little bit of the politics involved?
The politics involved.
Because let's use the homeless as a.
You don't want to cut off your nose to spite your face. Hopefully you'll survive this show. But luckily we don't have a huge viewership, so you can be very candid.
Well.
Although we have one viewer. He approached me on the subway, so
Nice.
now
There
I
you
know
go.
that's
So thank you, token man.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm just thinking. But now it makes us a little nervous because there might be somebody watching.
Somebody's watching.
So when you go to the homeless and help them in whatever capacity it is, are your hands are tight or not? Let me put it this way.
I would definitely say they are, yes.
They are. And how are they? How?
Okay, so I'll give you an example. I was working on an outreach van service, and so we basically distribute food, clothing, and more to the city's homeless.
Okay.
And so when we were doing that, it was a situation where we would sit down and we would do crisis resolution with them. And when the crisis resolution was happening, we encountered all kinds of people from all walks of life. One of the individuals was suicidal. So I was sitting down and I was talking at length, and we were trying to, basically crisis response 101. We want to ensure that this person does not harm themselves. I was told that I have 20 minutes because we have to move on to the next person. And I was aghast because, this is an individual that's in a crisis state. This isn't, a sitcom. It might take longer than half an hour to address these person's issues. And at the end of the day, you are powerless. You have this governing body that is dictating how many people you need to see, how much time you have. People in their cushy offices that have no real experience dealing with the hardcore homeless are dictating how we have to do our job. And so thankfully I was with a worker that saw the value in being able to spend the duration of time with this individual. However, that meant that other people were not served in the proper time frame, and because of that, funding becomes an issue. We really need to ensure that we stick to the policies and procedures to ensure moving forward we get the funding, we get the support, and all of that. When I work on a caseload, I'll get 40 people, for example, and I have 20 minutes per person.
So let me just rephrase what you said for those in the audience that. So city, under their budget, they are allocating 20 minutes of your salary or time whatever is the operation cost them to save a man's life who is suicidal. However, they spend $6 million to put fences on the bridge of Danforth.
Yes.
And then maintain it for another millions of dollars in the possibility of someone jumping over there.
Exactly.
Okay, so we know that there is no logic.
Absolutely none. Absolutely none.
You are my kind of the girl, so too bad I am too old. So I would ask you out at that time.
Exactly, you made your declaration of celibacy too soon. That's right. The one thing I'm thinking about is, let's say, if we look at it from the other perspective, looking at it almost like a kind of taking the camera, panning out, and looking at the macro of this whole system of the homeless, right?
Yes.
Who benefits? Because there's always somebody benefiting that holds this in place. So who's benefiting here? Obviously not the homeless, we know that.
No.
And not you.
Is it the charities in terms of subsidies? Is it like who's
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think that definitely, who is benefiting? That is a great question, because the homeless themselves are not benefiting. They're not getting the support they need. I mean, there's constantly too many of them to put inside a shelter system. So I think we're coating the caseworkers' pockets. I mean, they're definitely, and the head of these charities are obviously benefiting as well.
Of course.
I mean, the people
Have
in
you
the
seen-
system are profiting from people's misery. That's the
And
bottom
what,
line.
and specifically how? Let's say, how does the system, because I remember somebody who was an activist for the homeless, although he was a little bit of a player himself in terms of using it, etc., which is unfortunate too, that sort of the game exists everywhere. So the kinds of individuals who tend to represent the homeless will not be the most, scrupulous individuals either, because of, as is the case in everything, right? So as he was describing to me something to do with the charities like Salvation Army, etc., that for each homeless that they were helping, they ended up getting this kind of subsidy. So there was a kind of almost a multiplier effect, where for each dollar that went out, they'd pull in 3, which would then help their administration. And so that they were actually, the more they put out, the more they were making money. And so that they actually was a kind of a boondoggle for them. It was a gravy train.
Yeah.
Is that the case? Like, you would know that in more detail. It was just sort of generalized, and I don't know how, scrupulous this individual was.
Yeah.
But does this kind of thing go on?
I mean, I know that I wouldn't be surprised. Unfortunately, I don't know the background of the finances. But I would say that when you're a position in power, whether it's politics, whether it's a charitable organization, you're the head of that, there seems to be a draw to power, right? And it's the love of power, not the power of love, that's present. So I think
well
that
expressed.
that's the bottom line, is that these people are thriving in that kind of an environment and aren't necessarily acting for the best interests of the
So
people.
if you had your druthers, and let's say you were starting from scratch now, you're on an island, and you had this issue, like this problem, how would you approach it that's different today? Like, what would be the way that you would go about either, 1, solving the current one, and 2, preventing it from arising?
Preventing homelessness from arising entirely. Wow. I would say that it starts with self-love. That I would teach people to value themselves first and foremost. I think that when you have a healthy self-image, that you are able to make better choices overall. And so when you're making more informed choices, when you're acting for your benefit, when you truly love yourself, you're less likely to be careless with your lifestyle. You're more inclined to make healthier, better choices, whether it's with your finances, whether it's with your career, whether it's with your relationships. And that all in turn plays a role. I mean, there are as many people homeless as there are so many reasons for homelessness, rather, and there are so many people homeless. So there's no one reason for being homeless, but what I have seen is that a lot of people have, addictions, and addictions usually have to do with either aversion or addiction. You're either running from something or you're running to something. Well, if you have a self-image that's healthy and loving, you're less likely to want to run away from yourself, and you're less likely to want to run towards something else. So I think that you really need to nurture and love yourself first and foremost.
Well, you're talking about self-esteem. Do you think you're close to the end of the program? Do you think it is the duty of the state or duty of the parenting?
I think that, it starts in the home, and then it needs to branch out. And when you have a healthy child, that in turn will promote healthy adults, and that will in turn help society as a whole.
Because one of the objections about the educational system in North America was, or have been over the decades, that they generate very confident individual but incompetent individual as well. Unlike the Eastern philosophy, that they generate competent individual but with low self-esteem kind of thing. Not that they are not confident enough. Now, do you agree with that statement? Because if they are confident and they are incompetent, they shouldn't fall in the cracks of the. But apparently, the statement has its own flaws as well.
Yeah, I think that if you have confidence, you have confidence, because they go hand in hand.
Yeah. So I think it is just false confidence
Yes.
that is just like in form of the
Yes.
pseudo
Yes, exactly.
Pseudo confident that
Pseudo.
well, like in the United States, you can grow up to be a president or something.
Yeah, exactly.
With enough of it.
Are we at
Just don't do it in half measures.
First of all,
Right.
too bad that you came in the middle. We could get
Yes.
more of you. Quite honestly, I'm glad that you came.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And
is
I do
my
And
pleasure
when you
to
say
have
quite
you.
honestly, you're one of the few guests who are glad that you came.
Oh,
So that
okay.
puts you on a very, very short list.
You are in a very top.
Yeah, exactly.
notch.
Represent.
And you leave the audience always wanting more, which is
Ah.
In
wonderful.
fact, probably you are the only guest that we have had so far.
Now we've insulted everybody who's ever been on this show.
Let me finish my statement before you come to conclusion. You see, that is the problem with the low self-esteem.
Mine or yours?
Both.
This will be our next topic. Exactly to
The
continue
point is
to resolve that for
you
next
are
week. You see
the
what you
only
started here.
guest- You are the only guest we had so far, as young as you are, as bright as you are, as compassionate as you are. Put it this way.
Exactly.
If
Now we don't know what to do
you,
next.
You can go and check our shows and see.
Yeah.
You can find.
You rest your case.
Case closed.
I defy you to challenge that assertion.
I don't say anything without complete evidence.
Ah, there you go.
And we've
Gotta
been
back
building
it
up a strong case.
And if the rest of the guests they are really offended,
No, that's
please
not true. We've
go
got
and
some
check.
wonderful
Yeah.
guests.
None of you were as young as her.
No, but
I mean,
they're each is
age-wise.
wonderful in their own unique way.
No, age.
God bless them all.
I'm saying as
Each
young,
and every one.
because usually I have seen young people. Okay, quite honestly, you don't know how many idiots I have seen.
And we come back to the idiots. This is
Well,
what
no,
I stepped
exactly.
into.
The fine
Our
distinction
shows,
between the
whole
idiot and the
principle
moron.
of shows
Yeah, exactly.
is like
It's-
a new version of Dumb and Dumber.
Okay.
no, but
Stupid is as stupid does.
Yeah, well, it's just like Gurdjieff said, what kind of idiot are you? So the assumption is that you're one, and so it's the acceptance of our own idiocy that is the beginning of enlightenment.
True.
Well,
And for instance, my good friend Bauman, he discovered this Bashman, his inner idiot, sooner than, basically that was that's how we met.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
It was.
He met
It
Bashman
was
first.
exactly. We were trying to figure out whether Bashman was an idiot or a moron. And the thing is, the jury's still out, and it activated my own inner idiot. And this is basically where we're going to carry on from.
So you bosh them on inside.
Okay. Yes.
Stay tuned for more.
Okay,
Exactly.
folks, you heard it all
And then,
here.
you know, the camera pans out as
Now those of you really have a doubt, you can go in
leaving us
front of
squabbling
mirror
here.
and check it out that whether or not
We're
you
not
have,
looking for a conclusion.
No.
you have
Exactly.
Bashman inside you.
Yeah, exactly.
Just-
Your own inner Bashman.
Yeah, bosh them on.
thank you for tuning
I
in.
like this Bosh
this-
them on. That's right. Now,
Let me wrap
the
this
heck with
show
this,
up.
your inner love stuff.
that's
Now we're into something real.
Relax.
Exactly.
I have to wrap it up. Our
All this nonsense
producer is
about love.
angry
Now we're
now.
getting to the point.
Again, thank you very much for joining us. And folks, that was our show for this Tuesday, 5th of April 2016. And as you see, my colleague is somehow
Disruptive
on
as
some
usual.
sort of the drugs or something. I'm
No,
not sure.
you'd like to think so. The problem is I'm
good
not.
thing is that we have a counselor in hand, so she can help him.
I can get the care I so need.
Thank you and good night.
Got my city, got my sin, got my baby, I'm rolling in. Well, she's gone, gone on high. I know she's lost, she's gonna die. Used to give me supper in a $5 bill, sitting with the birds on the windowsill. I wish I could fly away. Down